I wrote a book in a month and a half. Yeah, that happened. But before it took a month and a half, it took 5 years. And then before it took 5 years, it actually took 10 years for me to write it, which is crazy. But let me explain. This is my book, and it took me a month and a half to physically type it out. And this is not a shameless plug. It actually took, let's total it, 10 years for me to write. Picture it. 2012, 2011, you have me in high school thinking I'm going to be a professional writer. I'm going to be an author. And I start writing a book. And I ended up switching that book for another book. And then I was like, no, I don't like this book. I'm going to write another book. And finally, my senior year of high school is when I decide, okay, this is what I'm going to write on. And I kept writing it and I kept writing it and I incorporated it into my senior project. And my teacher was like, oh, this is amazing. Book was not done. I go off to college. I finished this book that I had been working on for like a year and a half, 2 years. And I was so proud and so happy. And when did I finish it? I finished it December 25th, 2013 at like 7 a.m. in the morning. I had stayed up all night just so I could finish that book. Did I publish it? No. I actually spent the next like 5 years editing it until I hated it and myself. I continued college and I was like, well, you know what? While I'm editing this, why don't I write something else? I then wrote my second book, which I tried to write it 1 year, failed. I tried to write it another year, failed. By junior year of college, I finally was like, we need to sit down, we need to write it. And I think I wrote that in like 6 months. And I was like, oh my gosh, we went from a couple years to a couple months. But also, in that meantime, I was pretty frustrated with my life at that point, and I was like, you know, I just need to express myself. So I decided to start writing poetry. And I wrote a poem, and then I wrote another one, and then I was like, let me post it on Instagram. So I posted it on Instagram, and I don't know how it happened, but I decided to start writing a poem a day, every single day. And I had no end in sight. So that wasn't the plan, that's just what happened. So between 2014 and 2017, I wrote a poem a day every single day. It actually ended up being more than one poem a day because sometimes I wouldn't like the poem that I wrote, so I'd write another one and then another one until it's like, okay, this one feels right. I don't know why I did it, but I'm glad I did it. And I ended up growing so much more as a writer because the poems that I can look back on before, some of them I'm still like, you know what, that's pretty good. But some of them, I would never write anything like that now. And then I stopped because I graduated and I was in complete burnout. I was tired, I was exhausted, and I couldn't do it anymore. By that point, I had completed 2 books, like 4 short stories, a play, and like thousands of poems. So I was like, you know, we're not doing too bad, at least we're practicing. People kept telling me, you should write a poetry book, but I didn't know what that would look like. So while I was in school, I tried, but it didn't feel right. And then I graduated. I was like, I have all this time. Let me try and make a poetry book. So I compiled all the poems I had written in those 3 years, and I picked my favorite ones. And then of those favorite ones, I picked my most favorite ones. And I tried to just put them all together, and I didn't like it. And then I was like, okay, let's try again. And I tried to categorize them, like, okay, this section's about this section is about that, and I still didn't like it. So I took a small break, and then I was like, you know what? I loved poetry and I loved writing poetry, but I kind of like more of a narrative form of like each thing goes into the next. I don't like the whole, you're reading this and then the next thing has nothing to do with that. So you know what? Let's try writing a poetry book where each poem flows into the next one in some way. And I tried that. I got something close to something, but it wasn't quite right. So I was like, you know what? I quit. I give up. Leave it alone. Leave me alone. I give up. But not actually. Then last year when I went to Italy, I was still writing any chance that I could. And when I came back, that's when everything just clicked. So January, I sat down, I wrote this book that isn't really a poem and it isn't really a story, but it's somewhere in between. It's a flow. that allows a story to be told, but allows poetry to help tell that story. And that if you want to just read the poems, you can just read the poems. If you want to focus on the story, you can focus on the story. But for the most part, I wanted something that could still be a story from beginning to end. I didn't want just poem, 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 poem. And I wanted it to still be a story. So that's what I did. And when I sat down, because I wasn't really trying, I had kind of given up. I was at a point of we're just gonna write and see what comes out of it. If it's nothing, then it's nothing. If it's just for me, it's just for me. But as I was writing it, everything just flowed. And the most amazing thing is that while I was creating new poems, I was able to go back to old poems. In the end, I realized that even though I had wanted this poetry book to come out like 5 years ago or 3 years ago, the only time it could have come out was now, because some of those poems could not have existed 5 years ago. Some of these poems could not have even been a thought a year ago. But because of everything that I went through, that's how this book came about. The most important thing is that I'm so proud of it. Not because of numbers, not because of however many people are going to see it, but because I can see how it came from all those years of waiting and all those years of writing. So that is how She Began as a Dream came about. This is not supposed to be a shameless plug, but I might as well plug it since it's here. I wanted this to be more so encouragement for people who are writing or who are working on projects or working on something that they care about but feel like, why hasn't it happened yet? Time and time again, I have seen that sometimes if you try and rush it, there's something that you're going to miss out on, because if I had tried to rush it or tried to just put out whatever I had back then, I know I wouldn't have been proud of it. And the reason why I can be proud of this no matter what happens, even if I'm the only person that reads it, I can be proud of it because I can literally read history in this book. I can read all the poems and all the lessons that I've learned in this. That this would not be if not for the time that it took to get there. With that being said, I'm just going to read a little bit of it here. I'm just going to read the first 2 pages. Okay? She Began as a Dream by Brenda Basura. The dedication is to a former self and to all the children, young and old, who began as dreams. She sits alone, a small figure facing the sun. A shadow, and beside that shadow another approaches. He sits down beside her without hesitation and watches her as she watches the view before her. She, on her mountaintop, gazing down at the world below, and with a smile on her face, she watches life unfold. Light spilling over the clouds and onto the hilltops. The calm journey of the river past the valley. The early birds sing and the bees hum as they dance above the colorful fields. The trees towering over them extend toward her heights and beyond her, like arms reaching toward the heavens. She recalls when the land that these forests now occupy was barren and desert, and now it is a land overflowing with life. It's changed so much, hasn't it? The man says. She finally turns to him. Do I know you, sir? He smiles before replying. Yes, you do, but not as I have known you. And how have you known me, she replies, unbothered but also intrigued. Sitting there, side by side like 2 old friends, she knows something feels familiar about him but nothing more. So she leans in closer to hear his response. I have known you the way you always wanted to be known, from beginning to end. Like a book, I've been devouring every page, not letting even the smallest word or phrase escape me. I have known you, from the thoughts you refuse to utter, the emotions you dare not feel, the words you keep only on the tip of your tongue but never speak. From everything you once thought and hoped you'd be to who you are now and will one day be, I have known you. Every expression, every move, every hesitation, everything you were and were not, I have known. Even when you forgot me or pretended to forget me. When you hid from me and feigned to hate me. Through it all, I have known you, though you knew little of me. Their silence. Nothing but the whistle of the wind between them. He watches as a fresh wave of pain moves through her and the tears flow heavily from her. He embraces her and she melts in his arms. You came. Of course, my dear. You called. Like the cooing of a dove was her voice on the wind, and the wind was always faithful to deliver such sweet sounds. Words that had been buried. Simply debris beneath an avalanche of broken thoughts, but recently uncovered and brought back to life. There was something in that heart of hers that wouldn't let it go. When she had thought that all was lost, something in her still held on. There was a cry, a coo, an ache, with an origin beyond her timeline, that she had carried with her since she first began, that she had tried to kill, but carried still. All right, there it is. Link will be in the description, but no pressure. And to anyone else who's working on anything, on any creative form, any art form, any painting, any story, anything, I wish you luck and perseverance. It ain't easy, but keep going. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys are working on. Bye.